Adrian Houser represents the front office doing an in-season do-over from all the offseason moves not panning out. And plus, Luis Robert Jr. might be broken beyond repair. Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, and write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Adrian Houser officially signed yesterday, and then he made his Sox debut later that night, and he was outstanding. But let's also discuss how the Sox front office veteran offseason additions are not panning out as the reason that he's on the team in the first place. Then Luis Robert Jr. admitted no team wants him in a trade. Let's discuss if he's broken beyond repair. And finally, it's a Wayback Wednesday. Let's pay tribute to a famous White Sox fan that is not the Pope, as George Wendt passed away yesterday. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, so Adrien Houser did exactly what the White Sox were hoping for when they officially signed him yesterday. I mean, basically, he signs in the afternoon, and then they immediately put him on the mound. He starts, he signs his contract. He's going to get, I think, a prorated $1.3 million. And then about 5 hours later, and he has to also wait out a rain delay, he's on the mound pitching for the White Sox. But he 8 innings, and he gave the Sox a chance to win. Although in last night's case, he was a big reason the Sox won, as he pitched 6 scoreless innings and a 1-0 victory. And that's right. The White Sox bullpen got the final 9 outs. I know you're shocked. And even the beleaguered Joshua Pistachios, he was the offensive hero by driving in the game's only run. And I talked about Houser signing on yesterday's episode. Why? Okay, it's a good signing. It's actually not bad. But I want to focus in on why Houser is on the team in the first place. And that is following a recent trend of the front office basically doing in-season fixes after pretty much all their offseason additions not panning out. Not great, Bob. I mean, Shane Smith, Mike Vasil, they've been nice additions. But, in Shane Smith's case, that was a Rule 5 pick. That's just basically trying to find a prospect throughout all of baseball that you think is ready to make the jump to the major leagues. And he's exceeding expectations. Because remember, the expectation was, could he just be a long reliever? And Mike Vasil is hitting that as he was a waiver claim, although he's still technically a Rule 5 pick. So those are 2 guys that you basically scouted throughout the minor leagues and thought, let's just take a flyer on them. These aren't guys that you were, banking on being building blocks. You were hoping they were going to be organizational depth. And yes, they are. I'm not taking that away from them. They are exceeding expectations. I'm rooting for them. I'm hoping for them. I'm hoping Shane Smith is one of the team's aces going forward. I'm looking forward to seeing Kenny clear the bar of being able to hold up the entire season. I look forward to seeing Mike Vasil potentially being a long-term bullpen piece. And obviously the Garrett Crochet trade is starting to pay off with Chase Meidroth. Got to give Brandon Eisert also his flowers too, as there have been nights like last night where his stuff has looked really, really good. And he has looked like a guy that could be also another viable long-term bullpen piece. But there's also been nights where you wonder if he's even a big league reliever. But hey, for one night, he stopped his struggles. Stuff looked great. And he earned, in my opinion, another 2 weeks in the show to keep proving himself. So like I said, keep all these guys in the bullpen on a short leash. But to be more specific, I guess, in terms of like when I say these offseason moves not working out, it's basically the trades and the free agent signings to bring in these bridge players to be flipped at the trade deadline. Yeah, only one move is something that you can point to and say, yeah, that's working out. And even then, it's not like it's working out fantastically. I mean, adding Matt Thaiss in a cash consideration move right now seems to be the only good trade GM Chris gets made in the offseason. And when adding a backup catcher is considered an offseason win, that just shows you how things are going right now in terms of all the moves gets made. Now, everydayers, you did hear me in the offseason compliment every move. And I did. I thought it was very prudent. I thought it was very practical. I would have obviously liked to see them spend just a little bit more money and also spend a little bit more money on bullpen arms as everydayers. You've heard me, I know I sound like a broken record on this, but I would have liked to have seen them get more established bullpen arms on 1 or 2 year deals that you could flip at the deadline, because last year's trade deadline was very beneficial to bullpen arms. And I don't see why that would change in this trade deadline, especially because bullpen arms are cheaper. I mean, the Dodgers even proved you can win a World Series by bullpenning your way, even if you are in a big market. But the results are not pretty for all the moves outside of Matt Thaiss. And again, with Matt Thaiss, all you can boast is he's got a career high on base percentage. His defensive metrics are decent. I mean, he is one of the better blocking plate catchers in the league, and that is something that I think is valuable, being able to block pitches in the dirt, because you got to throw pitches in the dirt, obviously. And I can't wait for the automated strike zone, or at least the challenge system, to be put in place so framing doesn't become a thing anymore. I'd like to get it back to, can you block pitches in the dirt, and can you throw out guys? That's what, and then can you call a good game as a catcher if the pitcher wants you to call it? That's what really should be valuable. But he's about the only one that you could say right now could entice a contender to give up a prospect with a legit shot at making the big league level. Likely a reliever, although nothing wrong with that, but the Sox do need bats. And I think it's a stretch thinking Thaiss is netting you a William Bergolla type prospect. And the other reason why I bring this up is Kerry Miller of Bleacher Report. He put the White Sox offseason this way. And this is part of his one mulligan every team would love to have. I suggest that you read it for all 30 teams, but here's the excerpt for the White Sox. Chicago's only big offseason move was shipping Garrett Crochet up to Boston for a platter of prospects. And it'll be a couple of years before we have a better sense of which side won that trade. But the White Sox also loaded up on veterans on one-year deals. Josh Rojas, Michael A. Taylor, Bryce Wilson, Mike Tauchman, Austin Slater, Martin Perez, Mike Clevenger, Bobby Dolbeck, Joey Gallo, Travis Jankowski, and probably a couple more, with entirely transparent goal of turning them into prospects ahead of the trade deadline. However, pretty much all of those guys are either on the IL, no longer on the roster, or producing at below replacement level, and they might not be able to fetch any return on any of them. See? Now, to be fair, the injuries, Chris Getz can't project. I mean, anybody that gets injured, unless they're completely not taking care of themselves, like Yoan Moncada or Eloy Jimenez, you really can't put the injuries on a GM. You just can't project that. And it's always going to be a risk. It's baseball. Obviously it's not a high contact sport like football or even, basketball, but injuries happen. Guys pull their muscles, get aches and pains. Major League. Love that quote. And Martin Perez was looking like a steal until the elbow injury ended the season. But for example, Bryce Wilson, the other pitching offseason addition, was supposed to be the backup for the rotation. And he produced a 6.62 ERA in 4 starts, hence why Houser had to be brought in. Side note, if you're saying, well, why didn't they just sign Houser in the offseason? Would have been hard to get him because he did sign a minor league deal on December 7th. So if you're signing minor league deals that soon, you wonder if he was trying to hook on with a contender first. You wonder if he was trying to get with a winning organization, see if he could win a spot. So I'm going to get some grace there too. But Mike Tauchman and Austin Slater, they've spent more time on the IL than getting hits. Tyler Gilbert is also on the IL more than getting outs. Josh Rojas, his debut got delayed with an IL stint, but he's now here. And he's through 14 games. His OPS is well under 400. He's just getting in the way. And everydayers, you've heard me discuss Cam Boozer's struggles in high leverage situations, although he got the outs last night, to be fair. And the reclamation projects have all failed. Nick Maton, Bobby Dahlbeck, Mike Clevenger, Travis Jankowski, all DFA'd. That is why you get very worried about Getz as an overall GM, because two things a GM worth his salt should be able to do is build a bullpen and find value bridge guys. That's called talent evaluation. And thinking Wilson is a swing guy being a good idea is evidence of just not reading the room, as Wilson was not effective last year as a starter for the Brewers. He was decent in relief. Boozer, good in medium leverage for Boston. Not so much in high leverage. So, maybe he should have made a bigger push for guys like Adrian Houser over Bryce Wilson, especially since he was decent in relief for the Mets, even though he was awful as a starter last year. But hey, can't go back. All you can do is make in-season adjustments. One offseason decision, though, I did agree with was rolling the dice with Luis Robert Jr. and hoping he would produce, to increase his trade value. However, that bet looks like it's going to come up bust, as even LRJ admitted no team wants him in a trade. And let's discuss if he's broken beyond repair, and that's next on Locked On White Sox. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? It's easy to lose track between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. And my wife was getting stressed out trying to handle all the budgeting, got Monarch Money, and now she's much more relaxed when it comes to the finances. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. And I know my wife's stress levels have been reduced with the help of Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you're not done so already. And if you can't get the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so Luis Robert Jr. said the quiet part out loud. And he might also indicated he's broken. So this is from Kyle Williams, the Sun-Times White Sox beat reporter. He tweeted this out. You can also go to Scott Merkin's write-up on whitesox.com, which is also a good write-up there. But this is what he's got. Luis Robert Jr. said he's overthinking at the plate, but he doesn't think about the trade deadline. Quote, right now, as my season is going, I don't think anybody's going to take a chance on me. I just focus on trying to get better, end quote. So admitting that he's overthinking at the plate is why I think he's broken. And yeah, maybe that's why a team thinks that even a change of scenery might not work. He was 0 for 3 last night, including 0 for 2 with runners in scoring position. And his slash line has now dropped down to 182, 276, 302 with a WRC plus of 65. So basically, that's 35 points below average in terms of being a valuable hitter. And just when you think he's about to, go on this like extended hot streak, like that 7-game hit streak he had at the end of April, he's gone 9 for 53 since May 3rd when the hit streak ended. 9 hits over his last 53 at-bats. 9 times. The reason why I would say no one is trading for him is the demand, though, is still likely a top 20 prospect. And I think that's why nobody's going to trade for him, because the White Sox just keep overvaluing him. I'm the way that Chris gets talked about in the offseason in terms of the value being like, well, he's more like, he can get back to being more of that 2023 Luis Robert Jr. I could just hear him on the phone with other GMs still pointing out 2023, and the other GMs arguing back. One season, always injured, very streaky, always striking out. So at least the White Sox are sort of reading the room and realizing you ain't going to get, 2 top 5 prospects, especially when his value is like, I think you're still going to be able to get something for him. Maybe the best you are going to do is Blade Tidwell, but he still provides value at, defensively and stealing bases. That's like trading for a better Billy Hamilton right now, because that's basically what he is right now. He's just a more talented Billy Hamilton. And teams do not give up top prospects for Billy Hamilton. And just when I watch him at the plate lately, I think it's all sorts of confused. You can just see the mind. Everything is just going, in tons of directions. And I think the team has got to try to get him, maybe a compromise, a controlled compromise, because I think the reason why he's so confused up there is they're trying to get him to not swing so freely, which is something that he does need to do. He needs to stop just swing, expanding his strike zone. You're not Vladimir Guerrero. And we have actually seen the benefit of him, being more patient at the plate, being more disciplined. He has an 11.5 walk percentage right now. That's a career higher actually right now. And his outside zone swinging percentage is also at a career low, 29.2%. And he's also not swinging, but what's happening though is he's not swinging the bat as much. He has a career low 51.2 swinging percentage. So you could just tell there's just all sorts of, and even when you just watch him, some of it is on him, obviously, but you can tell he's just all sorts of confused because I think the White Sox are trying to create this perfect trade candidate. That's just my hunch, my assumption. They're trying to fix all his problems. So then when they're on the phone with these GMs that are trying to, swindle, Chris Getz can say, well, look, we fixed him. He's got no flaws. He's perfect. Give me his 2023 trade value when you should have just, Rick Hahn should have actually traded him in 2023. But nobody is a perfect player. And teams are never going to pay the 2023 asking price unless, he's actually producing those numbers. And how do you produce those numbers? Maybe free him up a little bit. And I think what a fair compromise is, and it sounds like the coaching staff is actually trying to get there. I think they've realized, oh my gosh, we've overcoached them. But a fair compromise is, Luis, if you see the ball going down and away, don't swing, which he struck out last night doing that. But otherwise, hack away, swing. If you think it's going to be in the strike zone, swing. Because I don't think they're ever going to condition him swinging at pitches down and in. He's always going to swing at pitches down and in. And that's the only thing that actually frustrates me. The two times that he swings the bats that actually really frustrate me is when he swings the pitches down and out of the zone. And you can even tell pitchers like, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to fool him. And that's where it's like, dude, just even if he strikes out looking on pitches down and away, if it hits the strike zone, I'm fine with that because I'm tired of watching him strike out, strike three down and away. Down and in, I don't think they're ever going to stop. Because I don't know I don't know if he's thinking it's going to hang up for a little bit more and he can crush it. I don't know what he's actually thinking. And, I have seen him strike out a lot looking on pitches down and in the zone because I think he thinks it's just going to continue to go out of the zone. And, they just happen to hit the strike zone instead. So what I'd like to say, what I would just say from what I'm seeing from my amateur film study is Luis, if you see the ball going down and away, keep the bat on your shoulder. Unless, if you see the ball going down and in, please keep the bat on your shoulder, but fine. If you're going to swing, you can swing as long as it's strike one or strike two. Do not swing if it's strike three. And if you see any ball going down and you think, and it's going over the plate, fight it off then because it's probably going to hit the strike zone with your luck. But otherwise, look for the mistakes then. And that's the other thing. Maybe you do need to just fight off more pitches. Maybe it was like even Miguel Vargas during all his struggles was at least trying to fight off pitches. And I think that maybe that's what they need to try to get him to condition too is there's nothing wrong with fighting off some pitches. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't swing at pitches down and away or down and in. And then obviously because he's still got to try to hit mistakes because I think, teams are starting to give him a little bit more to hit because they're realizing, well, he's just not hitting. So we can get him out with anything. And he has no production in the lineup. But try to find a way to punish those mistakes because that's what he was doing in the 7-game hit streak. But now he isn't even touching those mistakes. And I'm not entirely blaming the coaching staff. I mean, the one thing LRJ has to be able to do is he's always been a keep it simple type of hitter. And that can only go for, that can only work so long, keeping it simple. Because eventually you are going to run into pitchers and a string of pitchers that will know the game plan on you and will not give you your pitches to hit. And maybe they won't even make a mistake. And then you're just chasing. So you kind of need a small little plan. And the plan should be lay off outside of the zone, outside and down and away. Try not to swing it down and in and just swing as hard as you can when you see that mistake or when you see your pitch. If you get your pitch, crush it, Stop trying to even get on base, try to steal bases. Hit home runs to make living with your strikeouts worthwhile. He still has 2 months to turn things around. However, if he is producing like this in July, then be prepared for an Eloy Jimenez like trade return, because you got to deal him no matter what. Because if he has these numbers at the end of the season, you're paying him to go away. So you should try to at least get something for him. But there's still time where you don't have to settle for pennies on the dollar. Although, as Luis is saying, nobody's even willing to give the team a penny for him. Well, let's get to this Wayback Wednesday segment. As I want to pay tribute to George Wendt, who played the lovable Norm on Cheers, but he was a Southsider through and through. And let's discuss the iconic actor's Sox fandom after the break. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So for the younger millennials and the Gen Zers in the audience, I'm sorry that I'm going to Gen-splain here, but back in the day, we used to be entertained by things called sitcoms. I know they sort of exist, especially in the mockumentary form, but there was no reality TV. You know, game shows were on in the morning, and basically contests, you know, the closest that you got to like a thing called The Bachelor was the dating game, again, which was on in the morning. But networks actually paid actors to be entertaining. And I grew up with a show like Cheers. And yes, my parents considered that family entertainment. They considered a bunch of people boozing and the guy that owns the bar womenizing family entertainment. It was the 80s, okay? And my family, we even visited the actual bar in Boston on a family trip. I was 5 years old and went to Cheers. You know, obviously it's a tourist thing, but it was fun. And, you know, I'm not trying to downgrade Cheers. I'm just letting you know, like, when we look back now, 40 years later, it's like, well, that's kind of what it was. It was, you know, people boozing, talking around the bar, and Sammy basically always trying to score a date. And we watched that show. I think it was on what, every Thursday? I mean, I know that was a show my dad liked and my mom, and we all sat around and we watched Cheers. And I'll admit my favorite character was Norm. And that, you know, he was played by George Wendt, who played the iconic character for 11 seasons. And sadly, he passed away yesterday at 76. And while Norm was from Boston, George was from Beverly, Illinois. And the obituary and honors always mention he never forgot where he came from. And he was also a huge Sox fan. And the Chicago Tribune had this in his obit. Wentz grew up near the corner of 92nd Street and South Bell Avenue in Beverly, and the influential father, Andrew Greeley, something of a local celebrity, was Wentz's parish priest. A diehard White Sox fan, Wentz felt the sense of freedom growing up in Chicago. Quote, "We could just jump on the Western Avenue bus and eventually be at Riverview, at Western and Belmont without even having to ask our parents if we could go," he told the Tribune in 1990. Or we would take a bus to the 35th, and we'd be at Sox Park. We could hop on the Rock Island and go downtown and covert around horrible tattoo parlors and try to peek in the burlesque houses, end quote. So, and, you know, he spent a lot of time at Old Comiskey. Last Comiskey has it up on X Formerly Twitter of a video clip of him, you know, kind of saying goodbye to Old Comiskey Park. It's a neat clip. I know Nancy Faust, she posted on X Formerly Twitter a picture of her with George Wendt. You know, he earned his comedic chops at Second City. And that's probably also one of the reasons he was perfect to play the iconic character Bob Swirsky in Saturday Night Live's Superfan skits. Bears. But, you know, the thing that you didn't really know much about, I don't think was ever advertised, was he was a huge White Sox fan. And I love this mention he had on his Sox fandom with timeout.com back in 2016. While Wendt lives in LA and spends much of his time in New York, he always finds time for Chicago. He grew up in Beverly. His wife, Bernadette Burkert, whom he met at Second City, is from Austin, and both came from large families who still mostly live in and around Chicago. Quote, "If we're not working in Chicago, we're there a lot," end quote. He won't throw out too many favorite local spots. Quote, "I don't even know half of the cool things that are going on. I heard Anthony Bourdain does," end quote. But you might catch the Southside native at a White Sox game. He jokes about switching teams, you know. Quote, "As a career move to be a cool guy with the likes of John Cusick and Jeremy Piven. But no, he wouldn't dare." Quote, "The few, the proud, the White Sox fans," end quote, he says. And that's what I love. George Wendt was one of us. He was one of the few, the proud, the White Sox fans. And, you got to be a special type of person to be a White Sox fan, especially now in, this day and age. And if you are of a certain age, we all have our favorite Norm quote. And I admit I love the popular, it's a dog eat dog world, Sammy, and I'm just wearing Milk-Bone underwear. Although I do love when Coach asks him, how does a beer sound? Norm replies, I don't know, Coach. I usually finish them before they get a word in. I mean, his comedic timing was just fantastic on that show. And the super fans, I just love how, it was the most Chicagoan thing possible, especially when it came to, like the fandom, who wins Dicka versus a hurricane? Dicka. What if the hurricane's named Dicka and then you got Chris Farley's character having a heart attack? I mean, he was just very good at making people laugh. And it's just nice to see that he was a White Sox fan. So RIP George Wendt, thank you for the memories and always identifying as a White Sox fan. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Sorry I didn't have a short last night. Usually I try to record after the game, and I fell asleep on the couch. So that's one of the reasons why you didn't see my segment on MLB Game Night last night. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss what I wanted to get to on Tuesday, and that is let's stop comparing this year's team to last year's, and I'll get into a specific reason why. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding Adrian Houser representing the front office trying to make up for a lot of bad offseason moves, Luis Robert Jr. sounding broken, and the Wayback Wednesday tribute to George Wendt. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. I do try to respond back to all emails, so if you want to, sort of be an electronic pen pal, feel free. Love talking baseball. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.